So, hello and welcome to Nutrition Insights interview series. My name is Vena Patel and I'm a senior journalist at Nutrition Insight. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with two experts from Kerry to explore the company's research on GLP-1 weight loss drugs. So, thank you so much for joining us. To start with, can you please introduce yourselves?
Sure. Thanks so much. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Horvath. I'm our Vice President of Marketing at Kerry. I also lead our Consumer Insights team, and I'm really happy to spend some time here today because our Consumer Insights team did a really large deep dive on GLP-1 consumers, which has led us to this really great piece of work around consumer segmentation around GLP-1 users. So great to meet everyone. And I'm joined here by my colleague, Vivian Sheehan, who's going to introduce herself.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. My name is Vivian Sheehan, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Kerry, with a core focus on our science-backed ingredients encompassing probiotics, enzymes, functional proteins, and botanicals. I've worked in business development for 3 years now, and before that, I spent 15 years in research and development. I have a PhD in microbiology and a food science degree from University College Cork in Ireland.
Thank you so much for being here, both of you. So let's just dive right in. My first question is to you, Elizabeth. Can you tell us about the specific criteria Kerry used to define and segment the five GLP-1 consumer groups?
Sure, absolutely. So there's been a lot of research done on GLP-1 consumers, and we really wanted to approach this somewhat differently than maybe what's out there in the industry today. So what we did is we surveyed just over 2,600 US consumers, and we did look for a national demographic representation across gender, generation, region, so on and so forth. However, I think what we did differently, maybe than what's out there, is we really wanted to get a full picture of how consumers are behaving and reacting across their entire weight loss journey. And we really wanted to understand those that are considering taking the drugs and also those that have recently come off and then long-term stopped. So we would get all the way from the consideration phase all the way through kind of a long-term maintenance approach. So we did look at all of those different consumers around considering, recently started, on the drug for a long time, recently stopped, as well as long-term stopped. In addition, we wanted to segment the consumers by those using the drug primarily for weight loss, in addition to those that are using the drug for diabetic management, because we wanted to see if there were differences or similarities between those groups. And then ultimately, the reason why we did the consumer segmentation work here is really there were 5 consumer segments that had very similar desires when we looked at the data. And so when we looked at things like their demographic behaviors, how they're using GLP-1 drugs, what their health interests are, what their retail and food service shopping behaviors were, there were 5 distinct groups that really came up from a statistical analysis standpoint. So that's how we've determined these 5 consumer segments. I'm happy to go into more details about all of them, but we have 5. The first one's the future-focused improver. The second one is the trailblazing trendsetter. We have one called the balance maintainer, one called the dynamic dad, and one called the steady sticker. And really, they each represent a certain percentage of the GLP-1 population. And happy to dive into more details about each of them here shortly.
Mm-hmm. And so how do these consumer segments differ in their purchasing behaviors for food, beverages, and supplements?
Sure. Yeah. So even though there are 5 distinct consumer segments, there are some similarities or some generalities across all 5. So I'll touch on maybe just a few that come across in all. So for example, all 5 of these consumer segments are vitamin and supplement consumers. Actually, 90% of GLP-1 consumers are already taking vitamins and supplements. So that's a huge opportunity for the supplement nutraceutical industry as these consumers are already shopping in that aisle and they're already shopping in that category. And that was consistent across everyone. Now, maybe what they're prioritizing in terms of certain claims or health benefits might be different, but in general, they are consuming vitamins and supplements. In addition, secondly, protein content is important to all of these segments. We say protein is king in this space. And really what we found is 70% of consumers here are basically saying protein influences their purchases, and a half indicated that protein even has now more influence than before GLP-1. So protein content, once again, definitely a topic across all 5. And then lastly, a similarity is these consumers across all five are eating at home more and cooking at home more now than before, actually 3/4 of them. So there's a really large opportunity in both retail and food service. Food service is obviously how do you create menus that interest these consumers? And then on the retail side, right, if those are, eating at home more, there's all sorts of innovation we can look at in terms of, at home cooking. So those are similarities, but I'll just touch on maybe a couple of differences across each. So our first consumer segment he's called the dynamic dad, and he is your convenience consumer. He's on the go. He's got young kids. He's running to soccer practices. He's running from the office to the gym. He is always on the go. He is prioritizing protein more than any of the other consumers. And then he's also looking for smaller portion sizes with packed nutritional value. So high nutrient dense, foods. So this is the consumer that is really looking for those, smaller portions, snack size, grab and go right next to the cash register type items. So that's a dynamic dad. The next one is the future focused improver. Tends to be more female. She's interested in healthy aging. So healthy aging for both her and the planet. So she prioritizes not only healthy aging for her, but the environment, and she's really interested in sustainability. So she's taking a more long-term approach to her health. So she wants things like mental well-being, sustained weight loss, and really clean labels, and a lack of artificial ingredients. I'll maybe touch on one or two more, just to give you a sense. Maybe my favorite consumer segment, he's called the trailblazing trendsetter. He wants it all. This is your gentleman who will try anything. He wants every claim. He wants every benefit. He's an early adopter of any trend that's out there. He's wearing wearables, right? He's tracking his fitness, and he's definitely kind of that LTO, limited time offer, try it and see if it works kind of guy. The things that kind of rise to the top for him are mental health claims, immunity claims, plant-based solutions, and energy. Those are the top four. And last but not least, I'll just touch on the study sticker. The study sticker is a consumer that actually isn't changing much. So, when we looked at these consumer segments, everyone loves to talk about those that, hey, how have their purchase behavior changed? There's actually one consumer segment that it hasn't. It's only 11% of the total consumer base here. But still important to note, this consumer is not changing much. She is who she is. She tends to be older. She's stuck in her habits. And really, she's looking for the same products that she's always bought, just with cleaner labels. So a huge opportunity in the industry just to maybe accelerate our clean label journey just a bit more.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for describing the consumer segments. My next question is to Vivian. So did the research identify any emerging ingredient or formulation preferences within each segment? Can you tell us a little bit more about them?
Thanks. Sure. So our research found that really 2/3 of all GLP-1 users were prioritizing all need states like digestive health, cognitive, immune, heart health. And what we found was the GLP-1 consumers, they really holistically have a proactive attitude to their health. While the short-term goal might be to lose weight and to maintain that desired weight, the weight loss is really their ticket to better health, greater resistance to diseases, improved mental well-being, and increased confidence. And like Elizabeth touched on, what we noted was while people are on these meds, they face suppressed appetites. And data has shown that more than 80% of consumers are not consuming enough protein. So protein fortification is clearly king. Fiber intake is well below expectations. And then symptom management while on the meds is also very, very key to this consumer. So managing digestive issues, constipation, diarrhea, nausea with functional foods or supplements that are demonstrated clinically to have solutions to manage those side effects. And then as we think about when the consumer comes off the meds, and that is, the key opportunity here, it's really about leveraging natural or appetite regulators, and also how the consumer is looking for ways to accelerate metabolism as well. Those would be key areas of opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And on taste, what role does it have versus functionality? What role does taste play in driving purchasing decisions across these segments?
Yeah, taste is really key here because taste is king, also like protein. But if it doesn't taste great, you're not going to get that repeated purchase. So, as you try to enhance the level of protein and deliver protein in new formats, and also deliver ingredients that have clinical science that may be traditionally found in supplements, and now try and lift and shift them into food and beverage, functional food applications, really managing that flavor profile is really key. So that did come across. I think there is a continued appetite for big, bold flavor profiles that will resonate with these consumers, but making sure that we can't compromise taste for functional health is really key. So continuing to dial it up, lean in, and make sure that you're developing great tasting products throughout the shelf life of these products.
And
Yes.
Vivian, if I could add as well from a consumer segmentation standpoint, when we looked at, each of these 5 consumer segments, there were actually 3 out of the 5 that prioritized taste over nutrition. So the balance maintainer, the future focused improver, and the steady sticker are all those consumers within our segments that are more influenced by taste than the nutritional content. And so they're interested in a longer term maintenance approach, right? They're looking at their weight loss journey over several months, several years versus just kind of a quick fix, quick now. And so, right, taste comes way more to the top in terms of their priorities. Whereas the dynamic data and the trailblazing trend center, these are more of your trialers, quick wins, once again, really looking for those viral products. And those consumers, yes, of course, products need to taste good, and that is a foundation. However, they're going to be more influenced by those kind of big, bold nutrition claims.
And how does Kerry plan to collaborate with brands to develop products tailored to these different consumer needs?
Yeah, look, I think Kerry, we look at delivering sustainable nutrition, and we segment that into maybe 3 categories of how do we help consumers achieve balanced nutrition, which is really limiting the amount of ingredients linked to disease like sodium, saturated fats, sugar, trans fats. And also then positive nutrition entails the incorporation of nutrients that contribute to improved health, such as fibers, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and ingredients that have clinical science behind them. When you think about the balanced nutrition consumer and think about the dynamic dad specifically, table stakes for him were low sodium, high protein, great tasting options. And Kerry can help our customers and brands design solutions for that type of persona. And then if we think about positive nutrition, where we're adding back in beneficial ingredients that have substantiated health claims, or nutrition boosters like omega-3 fortification, I would again say that Kerry can support brands to identify the right ingredients for your application, work across multiple delivery systems, and above all, ensure the end product tastes great to ensure repeated purpose or purchase. And then finally, leaning into the personalized nutrition, or nutrition that is optimized for real specific individuals rather than broad groups of people. This can include things like lactose-free food for individuals with lactose intolerance, but also rapidly evolving science in this space means the future may hold much more for personalized nutrition. And I think we're thinking, if you think about recommending a probiotic to somebody based on their unique microbiome, or their caffeine limits based on how quickly they can metabolize caffeine. I think the possibilities are endless to co-create with different brands here to be relevant to the GLP-1 consumer and the evolving appetites.
Yes, thanks for your insights, Vivian. My next question is to you, Elizabeth. Are there any regional demographic trends influencing GLP-1 consumer behavior beyond the 5 identified segments?
Sure. So, of course, we have the 5 identified segments. They all have maybe different profiles, right, in terms of their gender, their location, et cetera. But if we generalize and we look across just all the consumers we surveyed, what are the key demographic pieces that are coming out? So in general, GLP-1 consumers over-index as Caucasian. They actually over-index in living in the South and in urban areas. In addition, probably not surprising, slightly indexed towards more female than male, but probably not as much as you would expect. Yes, slightly over-indexed to female, but males, as you can see by our consumer segments, the male cohort is still very important. From a generation standpoint, your younger millennials, your older millennials, and Gen Xers represent 75% of the total users here that we surveyed. So really the boomers on the upper end of age, and then Gen Z on the lower end of age were a lower percentage. So right, kind of that sweet spot are your millennials and your Gen Xers. If we look at younger millennials in particular, they tend to be your trialers. So they are not on these medications for long periods of time. They have recently either started or recently stopped. So they're maybe joining a bit of a trend or fad, if you will. They're seeing if it works for them, and then they're coming off and trying to maintain weight. Whereas if you look at Gen Xers, these are the folks that more likely are finishing their weight loss journey and then coming off the drugs and really looking at long-term maintenance. So they're more of your core users, if you will. However, I don't want to not talk about boomers. I mean, I feel like they're a bit of the lost generation when we talk about these topics. But actually, this is the group that is highly considering. So if we think about innovation in the food, beverage, and supplement space in the next 2 or 3 years, this consumer base is more likely to be considering taking the drugs than any other generation, which means in high likelihood, you're going to see the numbers increase of usage, particularly as they age. So there's a really big opportunity, in the next 2 to 3 years to really hone into this group.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to say on this topic?
I might just close out by maybe overemphasizing just how large this opportunity is for the food and beverage and supplement industry. It's much larger than you think. There's stats out there that, can tell you the percentage of the population on these drugs. That's actually not overly important. I think for us and the industry, what's important is that this dynamic is accelerating health and wellness across the total industry, whether you're on the drugs or not. And the data definitely told us that in terms of the number of consumers considering taking the drug. In addition, as the drugs get approved for other use, there will be more consumers on the medication for other needs. And so we do have to recognize that over the next, 5 years, 10 years, that this is a dynamic that's really not going away. In addition, only 6% of GLP-1 users plan to use the drugs long term. That's a very small percentage. So there's 94% of users who actually are looking for more maintenance. Like, how do food and beverage and supplement companies help these consumers maintain themselves throughout their entire life, not just while they're on the drugs? So once again, huge opportunity for the industry to look at not just users today, but kind of the total life cycle. So that's why we like to talk about things like sugar reduction, sodium reduction, higher protein, digestive health, immune health, mental clarity. This isn't just about side effect management, and it's not just about, creating products that are complementary to GLP-1 users. This is really about addressing holistic health and wellness because it's going to accelerate.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing your insights and for your time today.